Good evening, friends. Today we'll be talking about the arrests of 5 rights activists across 5 different cities of India. This morning, the Pune police conducted raids on homes of at least 10 activists, 5 of whom were arrested. They are Vernon, Gonzalves, Arun Ferreira, Sudha Bharadwaj, Gautam Navalakha, and Varavara Rao. So, and most of the whole, they are being spoken of as urban Maoists, urban Naxals, something which we have been hearing quite frequently in the last few days. And the Pune police says that the raids conducted on them were in connection with the Bhima-Koregaon violence, and these raids are only in June we saw that 5 of other activists were arrested by the police in connection to Bhima-Koregaon violence. So we'll be talking about the implications of these arrests, and all these activists, as we know, are prominent human rights activists. Some of them are well-known lawyers and are quite well-known for their constant, fearless activism against the abuse of state power. So we have our vice founding editor, Siddharth Varadarajan. Siddharth, what is your first kind of take from this? Do you think that this urban Naxal theory that both the state government, Maharashtra state government and the central government is kind of pushing, and we have been hearing about this whole sudden rise of urban Naxals in some select media. So do you think this is a kind of a witch hunt, as many activists say, on these activists? What is your initial take about
the arrest today, Ajoy, of these 5 very well-known human rights activists is a fraud at 2 levels. A fraud perpetrated on the Constitution of India, on the rule of law, and against all right-thinking individuals in this country. The first level of fraud is the attempt to connect people like Sudha Bharadwaj, Gautam Navalakha, Varavara Rao, and others, Gonzalves, Ferreira, etc., to the Bhima-Koregaon incident of violence at Bhima-Koregaon, which the whole country knows, was engineered by elements who are close to the ruling party, who are close to the Hindutva groups. It's been several months now. Action has not been taken against those who actually were involved and instigated the violence. Instead, we are being fed this fantastic idea that there was some deep-rooted conspiracy. The victims of violence are the ones who are supposed to have willed the violence upon them. For what end, who knows? And Navalakha, Sudha Bharadwaj, people in different parts of India are all part of this grand conspiracy. The sheer audacity of the police case leaves one breathless. That you have an incident, Dalits are the victims of that incident, and you have this whole attempt to now say there is a grand conspiracy involving Dalit activists, ordinary Dalits, so-called urban Naxals, and so on. The second fraud, which in many ways is equally sinister, is this idea, which is a fabrication of the police, the intelligence agencies, and a section of the media, that there is something called a so-called urban Naxal, urban Maoist. The fact is that this is a label that has been pinned onto these 5 individuals. Earlier, the lawyers who represented some of the Dalit groups, Gadling, for example, were picked up on these kind of fabricated charges. These are very convenient labels that you can affix on somebody. You don't have to prove any charge, you don't have to prove any case, you don't have to give any evidence. Simply to say, oh, they're urban Naxals, and then you have the media carrying unsourced, unsubstantiated claims by the police based on very, very funny looking emails and fabricated documents whose provenance is not known. So I would say that there is clearly an attempt by the government, by the BJP, by the Sangh Parivar, and its mouthpieces in the media to create a sense of panic, a sense that the country is under siege, that Maoists and their so-called urban representatives are the ones who are undermining law and order in this country, whereas the opposite is the case. You have, Hindutva groups who are involved in violence. You have lynchers and lynch mobs that are running around free. No action is taken against them. No attempt is being made to unearth what the conspiracy that involves them, who are the people who are part of that conspiracy. Instead, something totally fabricated is put out, and you have, people like Sudha Bharadwaj who spend their entire lives fighting for the rights of poor. She's a labor lawyer, she's a rights activist. She was in our office barely a few months ago fighting against a slander campaign that Republic TV had launched against her. To have her charged under a statute that is meant to catch terrorists tells you exactly how off the rails this government and its law enforcement is.
Yeah, you rightly said Sudha Bharadwaj and other, it's been reported that they are all slapped with UAPA charges, which are like really very, many people say that these are draconian laws which have been used against civil liberties activists. But you rightly pointed out this Bhima-Koregaon violence the whole case has been kind of shrouded in mystery ever since it began. Initially, many people there said that Sambhaji Bhide, Milind Ekbote, so these two people who are known Hindutva firebrand leaders, they were behind instigating, giving inflammatory speeches and giving and instigating the crowd there to indulge in some sort of violence. So initially the Pune police started to begin kind of investigations against them. But in March this year, there were many versions of police which said that they have not been able to gather evidence. And suddenly we see that 5 activists, which included Surendra Gadling, Professor Soma Sen of Nagpur University, and then Sudhir Dhawle, Mahesh Rawat, who's a prominent anti-displacement activist in Maharashtra, and Rona Wilson, who has been campaigning against release of political prisoners for a long time, suddenly being arrested. And then there was this theory which suddenly cropped up from nowhere that there's an apparent assassination plot against the PM. So from the whole Bhima-Koregaon violence we have already reached. So today also the police and some sections of media reported that the activists who were raided today and some of them who were arrested were kind of the police was investigating this assassination attempt on the PM. So do you see any possible link? And they are quoting a letter which many of them have said as fabricated. What is your kind of...
You see, let's start with the so-called assassination plot.
Yes.
The fact that the Pune police came up with this assassination plot was itself a signal that the original charge that they were involved in the Bhima-Koregaon violence is not something that's going to be sustainable. So, and I suppose politically also for the government maybe to present Dalit activists, to target Dalit activists in this way, politically doesn't play very well. So, better to try to paint them as terrorists, as a threat to the country and so on. Now, the letter itself, and we can have a whole discussion on that later, but the fact that the government, a high-level committee headed by Rajnath Singh, and this is announced and advertised, they hold a meeting to take stock of the threat posed by the discovery of this information, something like 2 weeks after the letter is the existence of the letter is publicly revealed. Who knows when that letter actually came in the hands of the government. But you hold a meeting to beef up the security of the PM weeks after this information has come into your hands. So this means that you yourself are not convinced, as Home Minister, as IB, as all the other agencies, as SPG, that this threat is anything other than a fabrication that has been put out for political reasons. Now, sure, if there is a threat, by all means treat it seriously. That meeting should have been held on day one. If indeed there is a Rajiv Gandhi type of a plot, I want to ask you, if there is credible information of a Rajiv Gandhi kind of plot, which SPG in their right minds would allow Mr. Narendra Modi to walk 4 kilometers from the BJP office in a break with every security drill to Rajghat for the funeral rites of Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So there's a lot of posturing and a lot of drama. And now we are led to believe, because again, it's simply unacceptable that you would think Sudha Bharadwaj is involved in or any of these people involved in...
It has been almost as a, it is being played as a matter of convenience whenever the police has brought up this assassination plot, whenever it's convenient for them, and has been silent on it when it's not convenient for them. But let us see, because when many of the political parties, like the Communist Party of India, Marxist, CPIML Liberation, and many civil society groups have issued a statement condemning these arrests and arbitrary raids. They are seeing it is as another attempt to kind of silence those activists who have been raising their voices against abuse of power. Yes. So today the 5 activists, let us talk about them also. So Sudha Bharadwaj has been active in the Chhattisgarh trade union movement for the last 30 years, and everything about her is out in the open. She has been defending many people from Bastar who have been falsely accused in different kind of cases. So she has been defending it. She has been organizing workers' movements. So, but let us talk about these activists like Arun Ferreira and Vernon Gonzalves. So these people were charged with hatching a Maoist conspiracy. Arun Ferreira was acquitted of all his charges in 2014. Vernon Gonzalves, as you were mentioning earlier, was convicted, but has been since then overground. And
you see, Vernon Gonzalves was convicted by a Nagpur trial court of charges under UAPA and the Explosives or Arms Act, I think. But since he had spent more than 6 years in jail, which was the amount of time that he could be sentenced for those crimes, he was released, and since then his life is in the public domain. He incidentally does not accept the validity of that conviction, and it is his right as anybody who's been convicted to appeal, and I'm sure that process is underway. But it stretches the credulity of anybody to imagine that, assuming the state is right and that Vernon Gonzalves was rightly convicted under UAPA and Arms Act, it beggars belief that somebody like him would again run the risk of being arrested and charged under UAPA when you've already served a 6-year prison term, and what he's written about his time in prison, the way he was treated, the violence that he experienced, suggests that this is a highly unlikely and improbable scenario. Arun Ferreira, arrested in 2007, given bail after 5 years in 2012, acquitted in 2014, charged under 10 cases of the UAPA. Why should we now believe that an 11th case that is now filed today is going to be any more robust than the 10 cases for which you held him for 5 years? And these charges essentially are the way UAPA works and the way in which the government and the police and the agencies are able to mobilize a section of the media. These charges serve the purpose of intimidation. They serve the purpose of silencing. They serve the purpose of chilling. You don't want people to speak out in defense of the rights of marginalized people in this country. I mean, you take Sudha Bharadwaj. She has spent her entire life using the law to fight for the rights of workers, Adivasis, women in Chhattisgarh. A woman who has spent her entire life using the law, gone to court every day, we now are supposed to believe that she is actually a terrorist? I mean, which world do the police live in, and all these media channels that have been complicit in the fabrication of this kind of narrative against her? Or you take Father Stan in Jharkhand, somebody who's fought against displacement, somebody who's fought for the right to food of people. Incidentally, he's 80 years old. Varavara Rao in Andhra Pradesh is 80 years old. Fortunately, they haven't arrested Father Stan. Maybe they'll arrest him tomorrow or day after.
They had a search order today. Yes.
But you go after these kinds of people who are respected names, people who have stood shoulder to shoulder with the poorest of the poor of this country.
In all their respective areas, they have been also, even in recent times, they've been fighting for the rights of the poorest of the poor. So Father Stan Swami, as you rightly mentioned, was almost one of the prominent faces of the Pathalgadi movement against the state.
And they tried to book him for sedition.
Sedition, yeah. So they have already, so they have already filed a FIR against him. He has not been arrested. But but there are so many people who are also saying that Varavara Rao and Gautam Navalakha, they have been known Maoist sympathizers. But then there's another point of view which the Supreme Court has also, and other courts have also mentioned, that just by sympathizing with a particular ideology doesn't necessarily make you a criminal. Everyone has the right to believe in whatever. So could you, throw some kind of light?
If so-called sympathy
Yes.
for Maoists is going to be a crime in this country, then let Mr. Modi or let Mr. Rajnath Singh tell us why Gautam Navalakha or Varavara Rao, who is saying today exactly what he said 4 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, why we all of a sudden now proceeded against them. It's very clear that it's not so much, I mean, the state may suspect anything. The state may not like what Varavara Rao writes or what Gautam Navalakha says in a speech somewhere, but all of this is permitted free speech in this country. So if Gautam Navalakha goes to Jammu and Kashmir, speaks out in defense of human rights, that is his right, and you have repeated Supreme Court judgments, not just in terms of, essentially in terms of the law of sedition, in terms of free speech, that it is wrong for the police to try to slap sedition charges when mere speech is involved.
Yes.
So despite the Supreme Court saying repeatedly from the 1960s, you have police forces around the country trying to arrest and book people on charges of sedition. You have court judgments that even when it comes to something like UAPA, says that it's not enough for somebody to merely be a member. I think this was Justice Karju's, one of his verdicts perhaps, that it's not enough to be a member of a proscribed, I think this was in the context of Sheetal Sathe and others, that you can't, the police has to prove that you actually done something violent, or you've actually broken some specific section of the law. So, let the state, if it's confident, come up with charges. It's interesting that in the case of Gautam Navalakha, he was one of the few, the only one of the 5 who was able to get to a high court.
Yes.
Everybody else was kind of, the way in which the police swooped down and rushed to get remand custody and send the person off to Pune. Gautam Navalakha was able to, through his advocates, raise his case in the High Court. And the High Court has asked that the police, Maharashtra police, should present in the court tomorrow what is the evidence on the basis of which you are trying to arrest him.
Which means they could not furnish enough evidence to...
They couldn't, they submitted documents in Marathi. Now, to my mind, if you are applying for remand custody, now even the learned magistrate who signed on to the transit custody, transit custody in Saket, essentially they gave him some document in Hindi, but the bulk of the evidence was in Marathi. And this has been commented on by the High Court that please give us documents in English so that we can judge the validity of why you want to, what is his nexus to the case that you are investigating and why it is that you need to arrest somebody. And I think that, let the police have its day in court. This is look, I don't expect anybody to hold a brief for, just because somebody has a stellar record in the field of human rights or labor rights or whatever, doesn't mean that they cannot commit a crime or whatever. This is, the police has every right to, pursue a case. But it should present that case properly in a court of law. It should not attempt to suddenly swoop down, arrest people, plant stories in the media. Like one of the outlets was talking about how 25,000 gigabytes of data has been seized from the previous 5 people who were arrested. And it's on the basis of that investigation that we have swooped down on these 5 people.
Yeah, exactly what I was trying to ask you now was time and again we have seen it in Vinayak Sen's case, or documentary filmmaker Ajay TG's case, or many other activists' case, where police after the arrests or raids, they come up with similar statements every time, that they have seized a laptop, a few literature, a few books or some pamphlets, which who doesn't own a laptop these days? So why can't police, in such sensitive case, a case like this, why can't police come up with a little more concrete in terms of evidence and in making themselves a little more transparent?
And in any case, Ajoy, what I take strong objection to is this trend of leaking, unverified, unsourced information that is aimed at maligning and defaming the person that you've arrested. So eventually, Gautam Navalakha, Sudha Bharadwaj, they will all be freed. Let us be very clear about this, that as long as there is a constitution in this country, as long as the judiciary operates the way it has been, There is no doubt in my mind that these people will be honorably acquitted of any rubbish charge that the cops throw at them. But this may happen after 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. In the meantime, through leaks in the media, through, I would say, accomplices in the media, the police would have, defamed these people, blackened their name, and in a way sent a message to trade unionists, rights activists, others in social movements that beware. If you dare to speak out in defense of the rights of Adivasis or workers or women or students or minorities or Dalits, the same fate may await you. Tomorrow we can...
So there are political aspects to this kind of attack. Do you see that the timing of this attack, do you see it as an overall kind of silencing of any form of dissent and the attack on human rights?
I would say that there is a long-term trend, which is that, and this did not start with the BJP government of Narendra Modi, it's been going on for the last 30-40 years. Successive governments have, they look upon they don't want to deal with political opposition politically. So if somebody makes a speech, if somebody is organizing Dalits, if somebody is building a trade union, you try to disrupt that legal work of theirs through these kinds of criminal prosecutions. So this is a long-standing habit, unfortunately, of Indian law enforcement, encouraged by whichever party has been in power. However, there is a specificity to the current wave of arrests. As you rightly said, this is election season. We are now less than a year away from the 2019 elections. You have a ruling party that made all kinds of promises to people. It's very far away from having fulfilled any of those promises. So how do you negotiate this very difficult political period for yourself? You do it by spreading fear, by presenting this idea that the country is under siege, that the government is under siege, that all those who are pointing to the failures of the government are actually saying what they are saying because they are terrorists, because they are anti-national, because they are somehow pursuing some nefarious end. So there is entirely this political component is what is absolutely the key to understanding.
Especially in the context of this whole urban Maoist theory, because we recently had a very, very high, big budget seminar on urban Naxals. We have seen it doing the rounds in social media, especially Vivek Agnihotri writing a book and launching it amidst whole fanfare. So do you see a kind of pattern in...
What's the name you said?
Vivek Agnihotri. He's written a book on urban Naxals.
I don't know.
And it was released recently amidst huge fanfare where all the top leaders came, and we had a recent seminar on it, which was like one of the biggest events in Delhi University, and many of the opponents were not even allowed to enter the room. So on social media and media, we are seeing that there's a planned kind of campaign against, especially in urban spaces, trying to brand them as urban Naxals, and pointing and kind of invisibilizing everything that they have been talking about in recent times. And most of these people are critical, pointing out failures of the government, like unemployment or abuse of state power in Chhattisgarh or in Jharkhand. So what you see
I don't know who this Vicky Agnihotri is, but you see these people are essentially dupes of the establishment, who will go out and put forward all kinds of grandiose theories. We see them on social media, we see them on Facebook. So yes, they may hold seminars, they may hold events, etc., etc. But the fact is that in the last 4.5, 5 years that we've heard this theory of so-called urban Naxals, I want to see where is the evidence. Okay, can the IB or the police or law enforcement show us who are these urban Naxals, what laws have they broken? Why do, and in what way are they posing such a great threat? And in what way are they a greater threat than the urban lynchers and the rural lynchers and all the other people who are very much part of the wider parivar, of that are linked to the ruling party. So when you have very real, clear threats, look at Sanatan Sanstha, the people associated with it, the kind of the CBI itself. The Central Bureau of Investigation is itself now telling courts in Maharashtra that we see links between the assassination of Gauri Lankesh and Kalburgi and Dabolkar and so on and so forth. this is where the threat is.
It's been so many years that these cases have not moved at all.
Right.
They're like, they are progressing. The police doesn't have Narendra Dhabolkar or KM Kalburgi, and nothing is being talked about those cases, and suddenly speculative
so
cases.
I would say instead of going after where the real danger lies, which is, people who have assassinated writers, assassinated journalists, people who have murdered Dalits and minorities, or who have used all kinds of violence against them. Instead of writing books and tweeting and organizing social movement and holding seminars for action to be taken against them, you have this fabricated myth of urban Naxal, urban Maoist, who is the greatest threat to Indian democracy. But as I said, show me who these people are. What laws have they broken? So far, other than all kinds of noise on social media, one has seen nothing of it. And if what has come today, if these arrests today is meant to prove that there is such a thing as urban Naxal network or urban Maoist, then this is a really pathetic theory. Because if somebody seriously suggests that Sudha Bharadwaj, Gautam Navalakha, these people are terrorists who are engaging in subversive activities, yeah, they may be defending, in the case of Sudha Bharadwaj, a worker from Bhilai, fighting his or her case, or Adivasis, fighting displacement. If you consider that to be terrorism, then well, God help you, God help the country.
Is it reminiscent of an emergency-like situation?
Well, we've been debating this, Ajoy, actively for the last year or two. There are two views on this. People use the E word. People say, well, don't use the E word. So yes, there is nothing formal. There is no formal imposition of emergency. But when you have people who are arrested essentially on the basis of their political views, essentially on the basis of work they are doing in defense of the rights of oppressed people in this country, and this is happening without the declaration of emergency, I would say in some ways this is perhaps even more dangerous, because repression is happening and people are being targeted for their views, but you are doing so in such a way that the rest of society thinks everything is fine. Where is the emergency? So I would say that rather than getting caught in making historical comparisons, we need to call a spade, condemn what is happening today as a violation of the people's right to free speech, right to association. This is an abuse of the law. This is and what I find sinister is the way in which the establishment is enlisting as accomplices sections of the media to engage in defamation, to plant fabricated information and fabricated stories. I think that this is, in many ways, the devil that we have to confront. People fought the emergency, and I have no doubt that, democracy and truth will triumph even now. Yeah. But this is a fight that every Indian has to now engage with, because if people like Sudha Bharadwaj or Gautam Navalakha, Varavara Rao, these people are, if they're not safe, and they can be picked up on this kind of flimsy, fabricated charge, then, tomorrow there's no telling on whom the sword is going to fall.
So we'll leave it at that, Siddharth. So organized targeting of human rights activists, it looks like this right now. We'll keep calling the spade a spade. Keep logging in the wire for more updates in the story. Thank you so much.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.